We'll do a review of Lekutei Sichas in Chelek Tezvav. This is the second sicha for the Parshas Chayei Sara. So Rashi sicha, and the Rebbe explains the Rebbe explains the Rashi and points out that we see so many difficulties when you read the simple meaning of the pasuk, and the Rebbe shows us the real way how to understand the Rashi and what Rashi is really coming to tell us. Seemingly, it's a very simple issue over here. We read in the parsha that Avram was sending his servant, the elder of his house, and he asked him and he told him that so he administered a shvuah to him, and he says who the shvuah will be by Lekei Hashemayim, Hashem who's the God of the heavens, and Lekei Haaretz. So he uses both Lekei Hashemayim and Lekei Haaretz, and he tells him, don't take a wife for my son, for Yitzchak, from the Canaanite daughters, the women of Canaan, that I live amongst him. He tells him, go to my land, go to the place of my birth, and then you will take a wife for my son Yitzchak. And then when the Eved says, perhaps the woman won't want to follow me, go after me to this land. Should I return? Should I let him stay there to the place where he came from? So he says, Avram says, be very careful, don't return my son there. And then he says, so here he's saying Hashem, the God of the heavens. It doesn't say here Elekei Haaretz, the God of the heavens that has taken me out of my father's home, Eretz Maladati, from the place of my birth. What spoke to me, swore to me to say, I'll give you this land, he will send his angel, etc. So Rashi explains the contradiction over here. How come over here it says, the second time it just says Elekei Hashemayim, and before it says Elekei Haaretz? So Rashi says, Hashem Elekei Hashemayim shelokachanim beis avi v'lo yomar v'Elekei Haaretz u'lamay lo omar v'ashbicha b'Hashem Elekei Hashemayim v'Elekei Haaretz, both. Omar loi, what he was saying to him, Achshav Elekei Hashemayim v'Elekei Haaretz. Now he is Hashem Elekei Hashemayim v'Elekei Haaretz. He is both Ashbicha b'Hashem Elekei Hashemayim, because now he's Elekei Hashemayim v'Elekei Haaretz. But when he says Shirgalti b'fi Abriya, is because I have made him used to the people speak about Hashem, because Abraham used to work with the people and make Hashem recognizable. But at the time when he took me from my father's home, so that's why over there he says only Elekei Haaretz. He was only Elekei Hashemayim and not the Elekei Haaretz. So when he gave him the shvuah, that's already now he's Elekei Hashemayim Elekei Haaretz. But Shalochanim beis avi is Elekei Hashemayim. Shaloi hoyu boy olam makidim boy. The people of the world would not recognize Hashem. Ushmoi lo harogil ba'aretz. His name was not known, was not common, accustomed in the land. People didn't speak about Hashem. So we'll see the Rebbe is going to take every detail of this Rashi, the Lashonis, and everything. We'll explain it all with a lot of questions. But let's look now inside and see in the sicha itself. Aleph, from pasuk on the verse, Hashem Elekei Hashemayim asher lokachani mibeis avi me'eretz maladati gomer. That's the second time when Abraham was answering Eliezer, who asked, maybe if the woman doesn't want to go back, maybe I should return her. So he answered by saying, Hashem, the God of the heavens, who has taken me from my father's home and from the place of my birth. So this is what Avram said, was Avram had gesagt to Eliezer. So he told to Eliezer, he said to him that don't take him back, and he's telling Hashem has taken me out. So Rashi places himself on the words. Hashem, the God of the heaven, was taking me from my father's house when it was mefarish, and he explains, but he doesn't say Elikei Ha'aretz. But earlier in the pasuk, when he administered the Shavua, it says Vashbiacha v'goymer, and over there it says Elikei Hashemayim Elikei Ha'aretz. Amar loi. So what he was saying to him, what Avram was saying to Eliezer, now he's the God of the heavens, the God of the earth. Why? I have accustomed him in the mouth of the created beings. But at the time that he took me from my father's home, he was only the God of the heavens. Because the people of the world did not recognize Hashem. The name of Hashem was not custom in the land. People didn't know about Hashem. Basically, seems like the first time when he makes him the Shavua, he says Bashamayim, Elikei Hashemayim, Elikei Ha'aretz, because at that point it was already Elikei Hashemayim, Elikei Ha'aretz. But when Abraham was recounting what happened, the Kachan Beis Avi, it was only Elikei Hashemayim. Learning the Bepashtus, when you learn it on the simple glance, on simple, the surface, Rashi is coming here to explain why there is a change in the verses. But in them pasuk, in this pasuk, he doesn't say and the God of the earth. When in the previous pasuk says he says both. Okay, Ha'aretz also, not only Elikei Hashemayim. Is that Rashi Masbir? And Rashi explains it. He said, now he's the God of the Shemayim and the Elikei Ha'aretz. The Rebbe is going to ask and say, no, we can't just say that, because the Rebbe has a lot of issues in this. And the Rebbe is going to pile up a bunch of questions. The Rebbe is going to come up with a whole another idea over here that really the issue over here is, why is he telling him Elikei Hashemayim? It's more important to say Elikei Ha'aretz, as we'll see, as the Rebbe will explain. Based on, according to this, we need to understand Aleph. Number one, the shinu is doch nor in them was in them pasuk state nor Elikei Hashemayim. So the change that is that here it only says Elikei Hashemayim, Hashem Elikei Hashemayim, and does not say Ulamayla state Oich Elikei Ha'aretz. And over there, in addition to Elikei Hashemayim, it says also Elikei Ha'aretz. So the difference is that here there's no Elikei Ha'aretz, and previously is there the Elikei Ha'aretz. Tofarvos is Rashi. So why is Rashi maitik Oich dem word Hashem? And the pasuk Rashi means Hashem Elikei Hashemayim. Not Hashem. It's just over here it says Elikei Hashemayim, and there Oich dem word Hashem. So how come over here it says also Hashem? This heading from Rashi tells us something more than just, it says here, why does Rashi quote Hashem? The word Hashem says the previous pasuk too. So Hashem is not the issue. There's no change in the word Hashem. Changes that it says here, Elikei Hashemayim, versus earlier it says Elikei Hashemayim, Elikei Ha'aretz. So why does Rashi bring on the word Hashem? Base number two. So the voices are mighty. Why does Rashi quote from the verse? The follow the later what flows in the what follows in the pasuk. Asher lekochani mibeis avi. Rashi quotes Hashem Elikei Hashemayim. Asher lekochani mibeis avi. That does sicha nit negate to the shaila. That's not connected to the question. Hashem Elikei Hashemayim. Why doesn't it say Elikei Ha'aretz? Rashi doesn't have to say Asher Lukochani Mibeis Avi Me'eretz Maladati. Well, in the answer, it's important. Why is it say Elikei Hashemayim? As Rashi explained, because at the time of Lukochani Mibeis Avi, and then a question. As Bepashtus, although the simple meaning is a dos mighty. Why does Rashi quote it? This to them. Versus Zog Vaitan Bifirushes, because what he says later on in his commentary, But when he took me from Beis Avi, he was just Lekei Shemaim and not Lekei Haaretz. So Rashi quotes this in the pasuk because that's his answer. Is doch das Gufa nit verstandig it come on. So that doesn't answer that itself. The Rebbe is going to ask in the Hemshech Hadvorim, as the Rebbe will ask later on, further on. Gimel. So now the Rebbe also Tavos daf Rashi mefared zayin v'loy omar v'lekei haaretz. Rashi starts off and he says v'loy omar v'lekei haaretz. Why does it say lekei shamayim and not lekei haaretz? Rashi doesn't have to say that. It's obvious. Rashi should say lamaylo omar lekei shamayim v'lekei haaretz. So we know, and here it's only lekei shamayim. So why does Rashi have to detail v'lo v'lekei haaretz? Azachos mezetas alein, something which you see on your own. Erod gidart already. He should have started. Lamayla Omar above. He says Vashbiacha. For Noshe Rashi is mashma. Rashi says V'loy Omar v'lekei haaretz. Besides the fact that earlier it's different than what it says before. Sort of in this place itself, V'loy Omar v'lekei haaretz. Why doesn't it say it? His mashma says Do asvore adod gidart shtein lekei haaretz. There is an idea, logic would say that it should sell kilos. And that's why Rashi asks in a surprise, why doesn't it say it's just a additional, and then before it does say so what is the idea? Why should it say can't say as the Svar of Havos is what is the logic? Why should it say here even without the other pasuk Lamaila? So you're going to say the reason is nor the far, but state freer by Vashbiacha. So maybe no. So there is maybe it's no. It's only because it says there. You can't say it's just because it says Vashbiacha. It comes just to explain, and he doesn't say just to articulate it. The Rebbe already says, why was he be telling you that? What is he coming to teach us that he doesn't say Velekei Haaretz? It's obvious. Just say above it says Velekei Shemaim, Velekei Haaretz. He's like Rashi Gidaf Shraim Behepech HaSeder. So Rashi should have at least written it in the other order. If that's the only reason why Rashi has a difficulty, starts off with this, that its difficulty is because it's different than before. Above it says, and that's why the question is, and here it does say So, but the fact that Rashi starts off with the Omar al-Ke'oretz means there's the other way around. As the Rebbe said before, the question is why. That's what we're trying to explain. It's mashma like the Rebbe learns that is an independent question, even if it didn't say previous in the pasuk. We have a problem. Why does it only say Lekei Shemayim? Why doesn't it say Lekei Haaretz? And then it's even more difficult because look before then in the wording of Rashi is trying to tell us that here it's different than over there. So Rashi seemingly should have quoted from the pasuk over there. It says Lekei Shemayim Lekei Haaretz. So Rashi says, and earlier it says Vashbiacha v'goymer, and it doesn't even end with the words Lekei Shemayim Lekei Haaretz. Dalet. Rashi weist on them ort from Shinui. How does Rashi point to the place where the change takes place? With the word to l'maylo omer Vashbiacha. Above it says Ashbiacha. Doesn't quote from the pasuk over there. But the change itself that it says Lamailo, as Lamailo state the Lekei Haaretz, that over there it says, in addition to Lekei Shemayim, it says Lekei Haaretz, is Rashi blows Maram with the word V'goymer. Rashi is only hinting to it by using the word V'goymer, etc. Is a Satmiya Kfula. So they have here a double question, surprising. The Verta Lekei Haaretz, the words Lekei Haaretz, Vos Benigeze is the Shaila, that's the question. Which we have. Why doesn't it say Lekei Haaretz? It says Lekei Haaretz. Is Rashi in Ganzen it might be. Rashi doesn't quote it at all from the pasuk. It says V'goymer. Und davke dem Wort Vashbicha. and the word I am going to administer the Shavua was his Klan Chayei to the Shaila, which doesn't matter. What it's not important to know why, in what context it was said over there, it would seem. Rebbe will explain it this, but that's the question. Over there, it's not, Rashi quotes to the Shaila Ziyamite, he does quote. Asimen of the Pasik is Bechalibrik. First, what the Rebbe says, you don't even have to need. Rashi would just said Ulamaila. We know already where it is. We just learned it. But Rashi zok Lamaila Omagam Lekei Oretz. That above it says also Lekei Oretz. Lot man gewusst welchen Pasuk meint. We would have known which is referring to. It doesn't have to say Vashbiach at all. Balder steht in demselben Hemshach. It says in the same flow. In ganzen 4 psukim früher. There's only 4 psukim earlier. In Ois Beis, the Rebbe will try to answer in saying that perhaps that what Rashi is bringing down the Vashbiach over here, because Rashi sort of wants to say that it actually makes more sense that in our case, it should say in our case, where the pasuk says in our pasuk Kashamayim. In our case, it makes sense to say Lekei Haaretz because he's sending him something to find him a son. When we're talking about Vashbiacha, in which he's administering a Shavuot to Eliezer. Eliezer was a important person. Over there, he can just say Lekei Hashemayim, and it's the reverse. That Eliezer, when he's making the Shavuot over there, he uses Lekei Hashemayim and Lekei Haaretz. In our situation where he's telling him to bring him a wife, he's saying, which is something that we need in the Thursday, it just says Lekei Hashemayim. But the Rebbe says then, Rashi should have quoted the Yishlach Malocha in Lefanech. Let's look inside. Base. One could have seemingly explained the last 2 questions that the Rebbe asked. Why does it say Vashbiacha? And also, the Omar Velekei Haaretz, what Rashi means with Lamaila Omar, is basically what Rashi is trying to give us the paradox between the two cases, between the 2 situations. Between that's a shvua by Hashem, and this is bringing him back. But the Chelik and Ma'azzain, the let's say Shaylas HaKopan V'dechek, in a squeezed way, as Rashi Shayla Do, is beikar mitzadam word Vashbiacha. Main question is because of Vashbiacha. That's what Rashi quotes the word Vashbiacha. Eliezer, Vashbiacha. Who's he giving the shvuah to? Eliezer. In unser pasuk, Avraham Avinu sagt in our pasuk, where Avraham Avinu says, Hashem Lekei Hashemayim goimer, Hashem hu yishlach malochei lefanecha velokachta isha libni misham. Hashem should send his angel before you. So you take a wife for my son from there, where he's talking about a practical thing. He needs a wife he's sending, Hashem should help. Since we're discussing over here about Hashem's actions over here below, take me a wife for my son, take a wife for my son from there. So should be Lekei Haaretz. However, above over there it says Ashbiacha. I'm making you swear, Eliezer. And we're talking about by whom he makes a shvuah, by Hashem. So over there, he gave the shvuah, administered the shvuah for Eliezer. Don't take, go to my place of birth. Was that he's given Abdis Kambese. Eliezer was his servant, he was the elder of his home. The Rashi quoted earlier, he would take with the bucket and water the bucket. He would learn the Torah from his teacher, from his Avram, and he would water it, he would pass it along. So in other words, he was a person who is of stature. Over there would have been sufficient to give the Shavua by saying Lekei Hashemayim. And in actuality, we have the psukim reversed. Avram had meisiv given belkei oretz. When Avram says to the shvu babash biacho, when he's giving the shvu belkei oretz, but in our pasuk in which he's looking for the Eibishter's help, here he should have said he's looking for Hashem's help to find his son. You should say lekei oretz. That's what Rashi says. Maybe we could explain. But the Rebbe says, this is difficult to explain. So, the other first two questions still remain. Maybe the last two questions are answered. According to this, Rashi should have brought the beginning of the Perusha, because it's all the flow of the pasuk. Since Rashi's question is that we're talking about something practical in this world, that's why you should say Elikei ha'aretz. So Rashi should have brought that down. Hu yishtach malochai v'fanecha v'lakachta isha libni misham, and therefore we should say Elikei ha'aretz too over here. That should be the start, and then it says you should say Elikei ha'aretz, or the akoponim and Ramazan dos mit v'goyim, or at least say etc. The Baal as in them, because that's the main question, is that here it's more fitting to say Lekei Ha'aretz because it was something you needed in the earth. And now the Rebbe is going to ask several more questions in Rashi's answer. Gimel, we also need to understand several details and several specific language in the Tirat Subir for Rashi, and the answer and the explanation that Rashi gives. Seemingly, Rashi is trying to just tell us why does it say here Elikei Hashemayim, and over there it says Elikei Hashemayim Elikei Ha'aretz. So Rashi, without saying Omar Loi, basically Rashi says Avram said to Eliezer over there, why does Rashi have to say Bechlal to bring in the Omar Loi, that this is what Avraham said to Eliezer? Rashi should say why there is a language change, but it's not something that Avraham said to Eliezer. What do we know this? If Rashi's intention with his interpretation, if this is mashma pashtus, as it appears simply, as midushinu loshin, that the change of language. Freer, it says it says the God of the heaven and the earth. And now the God of the heavens. But Avram had in mind to emphasize the different, the distinction. As now that he got him used to his Elikei Hashemayim Boris when he's Ashbich Avok Shlechani. Chulu is it move Rashi Meisim Omar Loi Achshav Chulu, that he told them that now it's so. Rashi does not start his explanation. Now he's both Elikei Hashemayim Elikei. This is actually the language, the way it says in Sifri and Medrash. Al derech v'sis der Loshen, similar to the language in Sifri and in Medrash, in the Medrash. It doesn't say there that he said to him, Avram said to Eliezer this. This is the emphasis. This is what's happening here, but not that he tells him this. From the Loshen Omar Loi is muchach. From the Loshen Omar Loi is evident. As Rashi learns, as an Inyan from Achshav Elikei Hashemayim Elikei Ha'aretz Chulu. It's not just that happened that now he's the God of the heaven and the God of the earth, and therefore he can do Vashbiacha, and before he was only Keshemayim, but this is something he told him. What Avram Masbik ben Eliezer need blois durch Shin Loshen. He didn't just explain it to him by just changing his language. This was something very clearly that he told him openly. To Eliezer and to Eliezer over here. You can also tell so. If you look how Rashi writes in his language, you can see it's not just that he's explaining the pasuk, but he's explaining in his discussion that this is a explanation that Avram is giving to Eliezer. He say, Shehir Gal Tiv, he's talking, I have trained them b'fi abriyas. Avol shelo hoyu ba'olam makirim boy, know him instead of makirim Hashem. Ushmoy lo rogel ba'aretz, his name was not custom. So you see from the word boy and the Gal Tiv that this is a talking directly to Eliezer, Avram to Eliezer. Ubefrat in aloshen medaber bade, in language talking for him. Oib alt was Avram had gesagt is given nit mer with der shinu ben gevel keoretz. If all that he said was he didn't explain anything and he didn't, not like somebody speaking for Avram talking for himself, then he would have just said if it was change was only ben gevel keoretz, but Rashi gedarf nor verentfern dem shinu. Rashi should have just addressed the change. He should have said achshav lekesh shemayim lekeoretz avok shlokachani mibeis ovi. To explain what Avram meant by the change, that when now he's the God of the heaven and the earth, but when he took me from my father's home, he was the Lekei not as Avram is explaining this explanation. From the Marichus Vasignan is Muban, so from the length and the style, it's understood, Adosot Avram Gizok Meferish. This was what he actually said, and it's not just that he learned from his change of words. He did move on, so it's not understood. Who is Meruvas in Posik? Is Bechlal given Amira from Avram to Eliezer? Where is there a hint Bechlal that there was something said that it was a statement from Avram to Eliezer? Especially, where do we have the details of what he said in this saying? So, question is the Omar Loi. What is the whole thing? The Rebbe hinted for the second question. Why does Rashi emphasize Avel Kshelokachani Mibeis Ovi? Why do we need to know that this was Lokachani Mibeis Ovi? This would be the same thing anytime before. The reason why the Rebbe says Lokachani Mibeis Ovi was to enumerate the great favors that Hashem has done. He's protected him, took me from my father's home. But this specific point that it was not known at that time, Laman of Kamina, why did I say that? I should say earlier, Hashem was only Elikei Hashemayim. Chanimais Avi is not the emphasis for that's when it was specifically, but earlier. Rashi, let's look inside. Rashi is Mamshich. Rashi continues. When he took me from my father's home, he was the God of the heavens, but not the God of the earth. The mind of Kemina, what difference does it make, as this is given in their sight, that it took place at the time when that he took me from my father's home? Now, yeah, it's true. Rashi uses the Lashon language of the Pasuk for say, but stayed by them. It says right there, it says Hashem, Alekei Hashemayim Asher L'Kolchanim Beis Ovi. That's the language of the Pasuk. But in them Pasuk is doch the Kavone. Why is the Pasuk saying Hashem is taking me to my father's house? Not to tell them that is when he publicized it. But there it means is Avram Dibur Goran Andere. It means something totally different. So Oisrechen and the Toivas over there, his intent was to enumerate the favors. What Hashem did to him, to Avram. He took me from my father's home. From the place of my birth. He spoke to me, it was the far better. And that's why for sure he will also get Gosha who. That's why who he. Yishlach Malach HaGoyim will send his Malach. Was the Kavod is the Nagein that has bought from the Shinu. That intention that Hashem was so nice to him and good to him, that isn't important to explain the change for saying okay, Alikei Hashemayim. Why do we have to tell us this, that it was Chlechanim Beis Ovi? Number 3. Beim Zman von Achshov, take a look now at the specific languages of Rashi. When Rashi says Achshov, now, Zokt Rashi nor Sheirgaltiv Bifi Habrius. I have got him used to in the mouth of the creations, of the beings. So that is what happens now. But in the time when he says before, in the beginning, they didn't know. When they didn't know, is Rashi Meisif, he doesn't say, they didn't also recognize him. So there's another language. They didn't recognize him. And his name was not accustomed. So over here, Rashi doesn't say two things. Shir Galtiv, Kartiv. Over here, Rashi just says Shir Galtiv Yabris. And over there, Rashi says Lobo Makirim. He should have also added by now, that which is opposite the first matter, that they didn't. Over there, they didn't recognize. Now they do recognize. It's the that I didn't make it recognized by the people in the world, just like Hirgaltiv, also Hikartiv. As Rashi says, 2 points over there. The opposite should also contain both points. Dalit, Rashi benutzt da anayin b'pirushin oizdruk. Rashi in his commentary gives another expression here, talking about the people. He says, boy oilam, those who come in the world. This is in the negative. Rashi says, and he just changes from what he had just said. Fardam habriyas. Shaloi hoya habriyas, Rashi should have said. Fardam habriyas. U'mesayim the dritten loshen. And then he says, Ba'aretz. We're talking about, so we have briyas, we have Ba'olam, and then Ba'aretz in the land, jumping around. What's the difference of, what does all this mean? And then, hey, Babriya Zokter Hirgaltiv. Babriya he used the Loshen Hirgaltiv. Shirgaltiv Bifi Habriyas, so with Briyas comes Hirgaltiv. And by Ba'aretz, he says, Shmoy Lohoy Rogil. Use the word Rogil, Ba'aretz. Ba'olam Zokter Makirim. Rabbi is going to explain all the details, why what exactly each thing means, and how it all took place. In Dalet, the Rebbe begins to explain that because this whole idea that he was a Lekei Hashamayim first and now he's a Lekei Haaretz, what has it all got to do with the shlichus of Eliezer to find the wife? So this tells us that actually in this discussion, Yitzchak was, Abraham was trying to tell Eliezer, explaining him something that he didn't understand. Why does Abraham not want the daughters of Canaan, where he has influence? And why doesn't he want to bring them back there where he was born? If that's, what's the more important thing? His family, where he came from? But he says, a wife, get me from there, but don't leave him there. Make sure he comes here. And basically, Abraham was telling him that the people here, even though he has taught them about Hashem, it was only that he trained them, Hirgaltiv, but it's not something that they really absorbed. But back home, it's even less than that. They Bechlal don't know Lekei Haaretz. Let's look inside. Dalet. But Mendos alles verstehen will understand this all Bahagdim Matmiya Klolis and Pirush Rashi by introducing a general question, a surprise in this Rashi. What is Bechlal Negeyado? Why is it at all connected here? In the Mehemshech Hadibur from Avram and mit Eliezer, in the flow of the speech when Avram talks with Eliezer, like Ashidach for Yitzchak, and trying to find a Ashidach for Yitzchak, that Inyan, this whole idea is now he's the God of the heavens and the earth. But when he took me from my father's home, he was just the God of the heavens, and not the God of the earth. Why is that? How does that connect to the shlichus over here of finding a match for Yitzchak? So we have to say that he was trying to answer something which was bothering or could be bothering Eliezer, and this was sort of his response. Is the bir bazeh, the explanation. B'shas Avram had bashvorn Eliezer, when Avram administered a shavua, an oath for Eliezer. Don't take for my son a wife from the daughters of the Canaanite that I sit amongst them, amongst him, but rather go to my land, go to the place where I was born. Is verstandig, so it's understood. As Avram will nicht for Yitzchak isha mibnei saknani, that Avram does not wish for his son Yitzchak a woman from the Canaanite daughters, Canaanite woman. Choch afilu as anechi yeshu b'kibbutz. Even though I'm sitting amongst them, still he doesn't want them. They're known to Avram. They're close to Avram, and unter sein hashpah, and under his influence. Von deswegen will Avram dafke, so still Avram wants specifically from Artzi Maladati, go back to my land, place I was born. Ubepashtus hatam. So what is the reason? Simply, so live their Maila because of the advantage. Was Zaindik from Mishpachas Avram. The fact that they come from Avram's family, Zainazim mitzad atzmam beser. So on their own, they are better. Edeler, refined. Unonter to the tchunis from Avram. They're no closer to the character traits, the characteristics of Avram. Okay. Eliezer therefore asked on that approach, asked, perhaps the woman will not want to follow me. Shall I return your son to the land that you came from there? So in other words, he'll be in that better place. Since it's a place where you have come from. Avram comes from there. He lived there. Would be fitting as Oshiv has been Chayin. I shall return your son there. So when Avram answered him, be very careful lest you return my son there. So this should have been by Eliezer a very great surprise. Either way, if the place from where he went out from was his Artzim, Avram, which is the land and the birthplace of Avram, has in itself such an advantage. As that it's specifically from there he wants him to take a wife for his son. So why should he not return Yitzchak over there? So that's why is it so bad? And on the other hand, if mainly it's important and it's where he finds himself now, that's his influence. He doesn't want Yitzchak to leave from the supervision and the influence of Avram, even to the place where it was Avram's birth. Because the influence that Avram has on those people that he's amongst them, outweighs the advantage from his land. So why should he not take from the Canaanite women, daughters? But you're sitting amongst them. So we have to say as Avram, that he said something to Eliezer, which answered this surprise. Agam, that answer is this before the psukim, although the answer is not clearly in the psukim, the verses. And this is what Rashi is trying to tell you. Rashi wants to tell you, as the Rebbe learns over here, that saying Elekei Hashamayim first over here, then now Elekei Hashamayim V'Oretz, was actually a message and not just a praise of Hashem, mentioning Hashem, saying a praise. So he's coming here to say, and Rashi says, V'lo Omar V'Elekei Ha'Oretz, Ulamaila Omar Vashbicha v'goymer. From the fact, if we're just praising Hashem, then you don't say Elokei Hashemayim v'Elokei Ha'or. You say Elokei Ha'oretz. If you just want to mention Hashem and say, "Oh, the God of the Shemayim, God of the earth," no. Same thing. You make a shvuah. You don't just say praises. It's very specific because you do a shvuah. This means that specifically there's a message in the beginning when it says Vashbicha b'Shem that Elokei Hashemayim v'Haaretz, and now saying that this is what he's trying to tell him something. Aleph, therefore is Muchav Ramad gegeben an Entfer der Tmiyah, that he gave a response to the surprise. Ubemele Beis, and also number 2 is move on as der Inyan von Achshav hu Elokei v'chulu avuk shel kachane v'chulu, that this whole difference between before being a Shemayim and being just a Shemayim and Hashemayim v'Haaretz is negayet to Toichen HaShlichus von Eliezer. That is important to the content of the shlichus that Eliezer was doing to know all this. Hey, Rabbi, the explanation. Rashi places himself in the words. Hashem Elikei Hashemayim Asher L'Kochani B'Beis Avi. Hashem, the God of heaven that took me from Beis Avi. What is Medai? As Ibald, as Bor Elikim. Es Hashemayim V'Haaretz. Hashem created both the heavens and the earth. And here, it doesn't say over here, Elokei Haaretz is muchach. That means as the Werter, Elokei Hashemayim, when he's saying God of the heavens, they're not gesagt als tam schwach von the Meibers. They're not being said here just as a praise of Hashem. You say Hashem, so you mention his name, so you say, oh, Hashem is Elokei Hashemayim. Malderech, similar we find, Keil Elyon, Koine Shemayim v'Haaretz, versteht Freier. So you mentioned Kelel, you say Kenish my word. So it's a praise. For them, if that was the case, he should have said the whole praise. He said if this is praise. And further, Rashi says, so above, where it says, since it is written, I administered the Shvuah, but by the morning, Shem Hashem in mitten Shvuah, when you mention the name of Hashem in the middle of a Shvuah, is not masim to mafsik zayin mit stam divrei shavach. It's not fitting to interrupt with praising Hashem, saying all of a sudden, Elokei Hashemayim Elokei Haaretz, because it's a Shvuah. Und the Rashi matik v'ashbiacha. That's what Rashi quotes from the pasuk v'ashbiacha. But the fun is the hechrech as v'goymer. From this we know what he says, Elokei Hashemayim Elokei Haaretz. It's not stam hashvach. It's not just a praise. It is a message. We have to therefore accept. Asay Elokei Hashemayim do. When it says Elokei Hashemayim, Unsay Elokei Hashemayim ve'Elokei Haaretz l'mayla above. When it says Hashemayim ve'Haaretz, they negate to Teichen Divrei Avram to Eliezer. They are important to the contents of what Avram was saying to Eliezer. Their mitot their mahazvig and ditmi anal. This is the way he explained his above surprise that Eliezer would have. Either way, you don't want me to take a woman from these women here, yet you don't want him to leave him there. The farmers Rashi is talking, that's what it says, Omarloi. It's not just, he said, but he told him, not just a teaching and explaining why there's a change. Something which he said and explained to Eliezer because of the surprise that he would have. Since he changed the language, before he says God of the Shemaim and the Oretz, the God of the Oretz, it's not Elokei Shemaim and now only Elokei Shemaim. His movement, as in them shinu is merumas dasbore, that this change is hinted the explanation from Avram to Eliezer, from Avram to Eliezer. Amar Loi, he said to him, Achshavu Elokei Shemaim Elokei Oretz sheirgalti b'fi abriyas. Now he's Elokei Shemaim Elokei Oretz because I had trained him, got him used to in the mouth of the Briyas, the people. Was the mitfalt up the tmiya, this removes, falls away the surprise. We don't have any more a question. Why he refuses, he doesn't want to take from the daughters of the Canaanite that he sits among them. For Magam, as Achshav is the Eberster Do. For although now Hashem is here, Bimkoy Meshal Avraham, is Oichel Kei Avraham, is also God of Avraham. Rashi's language is Hirgalti. Durch dem, was Avraham Adam Mefarsim Melakus is Baruch Beilam. Hashem, Avraham publicized godliness, blessed God in the world. This did not impact, it did not influence yet the girls, the daughters of that place, so that they should be fit for a match to get married to Yitzchak. This is not an eifel because this is merely in a way the emphasis. Rashi, Rebbe is going to explain all the languages now, but right in the beginning, hirgaltiv, I have got them used in their mouth. It didn't change their character, their trade, their own side, their inside, their beliefs really. It's just the mouth they spoke. It's merely something that the people in their mouth used to say. It didn't change their actions. I said before, their inside, but here we're talking about it's just in the mouth, but not, it's an external mouth, but not in action. But in the beginning, he was only al Shemayim, not al Keoretz. So there is Shaloi Hoyu Boy Oilo Makidim Boy. He says they didn't recognize him. Ushmoile Hoyu Rogel Boretz. As the Rebbe will explain later on in the next thing, that Makidim Boy is one level and another Ushmoile Rogel Boretz before Avro. So, Lidoch Gisa, on the other hand, to go bring him back to Besovi, while the Hashpoah from Avram, because this influence that Avram had, he called the name of Hashem, to they become like the God of the land, to make him at least the way he accomplished in his community, now where he's living presently. Over there, at least he was able to do something. He made them like people all of a sudden know about Hashem through Avram. At least, okay, they don't conduct, but in their mouth they have a little bit. This took place later on. After but when it took me from Beisovi, the Hoyrogel Boris, it was not common in the land. Over there, meaning before, in the Eretz Maladiti, it wasn't even Rogel Boris. The Mele is the Ort from Beisovi given und geblieben, the place where his father's home, it was and it remains an Eifum which is given, not Elekei Hashemayim, but Elekei Oretz. It only remained over there, Elekei Hashemayim and not Elekei Oretz. They haben nicht makir given dem Obersten. They didn't recognize Hashem. Ushmoile hoyrogel b'oretz, and the name was not common in the land, which basically they were lacking over there a hakore, as the Rebbe will explain in a minute, and also it wasn't common in the land. The Rebbe is going to now explain all the different languages that Rashi uses to show how they all fit in exactly. Both. The Rebbe is Rashi Meshani the Torah v'chul. Rashi changes the descriptions Kenal as the Rebbe wrote earlier. Here you see again that every word in the Rashi's commentary is betachlis hadiyuk, is total, specific, accurate, exactly, total exact. It was introduced at least shortly. I'll say that in the order. Oz huchal likre b'shem Hashem. In the days of Enosh, it says they began to make weekly the name Shem Hashem. Is Rashi mefarish? What does Rashi explain there? They made weekly from Shem Hashem. They called with him people, they called with the name of Hashem. They called the name of Hashem. That would mean in the time that lo yoy makirim. They didn't recognize. We'll see in a minute. Vayikra Shom b'shem Hashem keilelam. What did Avram do? Called b'shem Hashem keilelam. Is Rashi mefarish as Avram hodamos oiv giton as mizol wissen. He gave a recognition as nit mishali achaltem, that when you ate it wasn't mine. Nor mishal mi she'omar voya elam. So he changed the perspective. Don't think it's mine. Besides having people thank Hashem in their mouth, but he changed their idea. People called chulin. He changed that the world, the Welt gehört zu Eloka Elam, belongs to Hashem. So Apikon all is moving. So based on the above, it's understood. Aleph. Von Yemei Enesh hat man alles gewusst von Shem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They knew the Shem Hashem. Hu chalikra b'Shem Hashem. They knew. Nor mit es gemacht chulin. Was das beweist as lo yemakidim by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They did not recognize, they didn't appreciate, they didn't recognize, but they knew about Hashem. It's not like they didn't know, they knew. And that's why it's hu chalikra. So he says, Rashi says, therefore, at that time, Shaloi hoyu boyu oilom, makirim boyu oilom, there is an enesh, they didn't recognize, no recognition, they can call the Atzabim in his name. Base, Far Avrom's Vayikro, before Avram brought the Vayikra of the Zon, Hot men gerechnet, so people thought, as Mishaliach Haltem, they thought they're eating from, that it belongs to Avram. You ate. You want to thank Avram? On that, every my item and every aspect is verstandig, so it's understood as Shemay Lo Herogel. So the name of Hashem wasn't customed. It wasn't a custom because, well, they had a recognition, but it wasn't custom because there was nothing of Hashem. Because for Malchus given it was either his or his friend. As she says, Makirim boy, Ushmoy Lo Herogel. It wasn't common, but Oretz, because people didn't talk about Hashem before Avram. B'meile, and therefore, is Makirim as Eriz Elokei Hashemayim. So they did know that he is Elokei Hashemayim in the Oretz. Aber boye oilam, the people of the world, Eider Avram vayikra derein tzezei. Just the ordinary people, loye makirim boy. They didn't say gemeintas b'shliach halta. They didn't understand that the Eibishter is in the world. They knew about Hashem, yes, but they didn't recognize. And that's why it says, Shlobe makirim boy, ushmoyel rogel ba'oretz. Ba'oretz is nit rogel redden wegen Shemayim. In the earth, it's not accustomed to speak about Shemayim. Is there far oich shmoy nit given rogel. So his name wasn't accustomed. We didn't talk about Hashem because nothing had to do with Hashem. So Shmoy lo rogel ba'oretz. Shmoy in the Oretz it was rogel. We knew the name of Hashem. Makirim boy in the higher places. And hey, what did Abraham Ragel given? Did not Shmuel. Here it says Shmuel lo about it. But before it says Shirgal Tiv, him. Hashem said, and Befi Abrius. Abraham hat Ragel given did not Shmuel, nor Shirgal Tiv, Emalein. Shirgal Tiv Asal Keoretz. He made him use that he is the God of the world. But every time, got him used to this. That he ate from his, and he told them, with your mouth, breath, they started using their mouth to say Hashem. So over here, we also have finally Vav. There were some people that actually recognized Hashem more than just got them used to saying. Because we know that Avram had some people that was Megayer. Vav, Hanefesh Rosu Bechorim, Zokt Rashi Ratzi Megayer given. That he converted them. So they also had a recognition boy. Not that they just his name was used to they Shmuel speaking his name Befi. That's why it says here, Shirgalti Befi Abriyas, because even in the Briyas, there was other people that wasn't just Shirgalti. The other people they had an Akora. Those were the people that it was Magayer. Aber the Briyas is even though Shirgalti Befi, aber nicht Makirim, but not didn't recognize. Zayin. There be Ripnimis in Yonim to understand this in the inner meaning of the things. Chayei Darpman verstehen. Seems we need to understand. Das was Avram hat aufgetan. Achshav is doch given. What did he accomplish now? It was that Eberster is Eichel Lekei Haaretz, that Hashem is also the God of the earth. But Melkei Hashamayim is the Chalam. It was always everybody Hashem from the time of Eneshim. Hein Favos is Rashi Kefil Meidich. So why how come Rashi duplicates it and it belongs? Achshav Lekei Hashamayim Lekei Haaretz Chulu. He's the God of Shemaim. What's obvious? Rashi could have said shortly, but the fact that it was a Lekei Shemaim, that's not a chiddush. Everybody knows that was all the time. Is das more in there? The explanation is when Avram was in Chutz La'aretz in the Choron, is sein Madrege given an Eifen. His level was in a way from Helen from the Bechinas Chachma, hidden from the level of Chachma. Und der Rebbe is ein Nomen damals given. His name then was Avram. Loshen Reimemois Behelem. Exaltness and hidden, obscure. Und das ist der Inyan von Choron, which is also the idea of Choron, that we said he lived in Choron, was the Bigamatria Goren, same numeric equivalent as the Goren. The Goren, the throat, is the interruption, because Goren is mafsik, is the interruption, the Amshocha, from Seichel to Midas. It interrupts the flow from the intellect to the emotion. So it's Rom exalted, it doesn't allow Avram, it doesn't have an impact on the Midas. So this was also what was drawn down through his service. As that he drew down additional lights above an Atzilus. But that flow did not descend into Bri Yitzir Asiya and into this world. Erst nur then wieder Eibishter hat ihm gesagt. Only afterwards Hashem told him, go to the land. Und is gekommen, Eretz Yisrael, he came to Eretz Yisrael, is damals given the Yeridun Amshocha von Helem Amerchen in Midas. Then became the descent and the extending from the hidden of the Merchen to Midas. Bis in Malchus beginnes Eretz until the level of Malchus, which is El Haaretz, to the level of Malchus. Und damals sein Euch the Toisus Eures. So then the additional lights was Avromat Mamshech given in Atzilus that he extended into Atzilus. They descended also below into Bria Tzira in this world. Was Abizei is move on their time. Nor Achshav v'lekei Shemayim v'lekei Haaretz. That only now he is the God of the Shemayim and the Haaretz. Aber Shalchani Beis Ovi hoya lekei Shemayim v'lei lekei Haaretz. Hagam Azich Beis Ovi Chor Nat Avram Gitonim Mefaris Zanim Kusimel. Even when the father's home in Choron, he publicized godliness in the world. But Yosas Demult is Madrei Goyse given bechinas Helem HaMoichin. But since at that time his level was the Moichin were hidden, obscure, but then it gepoilt in Welt, it didn't impact the world. As es was ein Elkei Haaretz, should be Elkei Haaretz. Und das ist der Tam, was Avram hat gesagt. That's why he said, Avok Shulchan Beis Ovi hoya lekei Shemayim. Lekei means what Avram gepoilt durch seine Avodah in dem Inyan von Lekei Shemayim. He did accomplish in Lekei Shemayim. As on Nimshach werden Toisus Eres and Atzilus, there should be additional lights in Atzilus. Nor demut is given was Lekei Haaretz. It wasn't the God of the earth. He couldn't be mamshches. It didn't nimshach geworden in the Welt. Ches. Like dem hat man verstehen, was gesagt, ach schon v'lekei Hashemayim v'lekei haaretz. Because now there was also a novelty in the lekei Hashemayim as well. But also in the aspect of the God of the Shemayim, is given a chiddush in achshel gabe frier. There's a novelty now relative to earlier. Those was Avram at achshav gepoilt as it soll sein eichel keoretz. This that Avram now accomplished, impacted, that it should also become a keoretz. As the amshachas del mail in Atzilus, that those amshachas are above in Atzilus, so nimshach werden eich bebiyah should also extend to biyah. Is given mitzadem was as is nimshach on his gali geworden. It's because it extended and was revealed that Helem HaChochma was his Hechef and Atzilus, the hidden part of Chochma, which is higher than Atzilus. The Toises, Eures, was Avramot Frier Mamshach given in Atzilus, the earlier additional lights that Avram had earlier drawn down in Atzilus, Zani given, if you see, was the way it was to begin with set up in the order of the evolution, so much to come down. Aber der Eibishter hat ihm gesagt, when Hashem told him, das ist euch nisin as koyachem, that is also given him the power. Leave your land and your place of birth. And he left Choron to Eretz Yisrael. Damult is in this Gala geworden der Avram. Then we revealed the exalted level, the Avram. Through them was his nimshach geworden from Helm Shemayim by extending, came out the hidden, which is even higher. As is geworden der Kish of Chibur, it became the tie and the connection from Maitzil, from the one who separates from Hashem, with Netzolim, with those who are Netzol. Now they have Vedas Avram, and through Avram's service is nimshach geworden Toisus Eures Ba'atzilus, through additional lights in Atzilus, mer wie es ist gestellt up, he said that Ishtalshlus, more than it's set up according to the order of the Ishtalshlus. So it turns out, as euch der Inyan von Lekei Hashemayim was Avram had gepoilt achshav, that also in the part of the God of the heaven that Avram accomplished now is given in a hecher neifon. It was in a higher way vikshel chanim beis avi than it was when he took it from his father's house. But Adrab, the contrary, mitzadem ilu v'hisofa was is given in Lekei Hashemayim, because the elevation, the addition that took place in Lekei Hashemayim from the Helen, from the Abraham, that from a higher place, is the Ramshocha, in the Ramshocha Vicht and Atzilus, in what's extended and the union that takes place in Atzilus, that accomplished the idea should be Lekei Oretz, as that Helen from Atzilus, that was hidden Atzilus, so Nimshach when his Galaver and Biyah should extend and be revealed also in Biyah Bislamata till below. Test. Alpha became, and still before Matan Torah, before the bit like Zeder, Bald, this is given Koidem bit like Zeder. This was before the decree has been nullified. Was Damot Tachtoinim Yalu Yonim, Yonim Yerid Tachtoinim. The lower ones can go up to the upper ones, and the upper one can go down to the lower one. Was hat sich overgetan by Matan Torah. That was accomplished by Matan Torah. Is Agam as Avodas Avram b'Yitzosim from Choron Eretz Yisrael. So even though that Avram's service when he left from Choron Eretz Yisrael is given Dachona, so Chibur El Yonim v'Tachtonim Matan Torah, that was the preparation, going from Choron Eretz Yisrael to connect, to prepare, to connect the upper ones with the lower ones that took place in Matan Torah. Or the Avodah from Avram and it gepoiled. But the Avodas Avram did not impact a shinu, a change, when Aliyah Mehus from in the essence of the matters of the world. On the Briyas Shobahem and in their creation, as Ozayna Lekei Oretz in Aifo for Akora, that it should change them around, that they should recognize it. Nor nit mer, only to the extent Irgalti Bifi Abriyas, I trained them, got them used in the mouth of the created beings. That's Mesichas Shabbos Pashas Chayei Sara, Tov Shin Lamed Beis.